My own sister ruined my life by assisting my ex-wife in making me pay child support for a child who wasn't even mine. Okay, so I'll be straight up, I really can't stand my sister these days. Though it wasn't always like this. She's my older sister Nina, and back in the day, I totally looked up to her. But as time went on, she showed me how crappy a sister she could really be. Here's the deal. I was married to my ex-wife Susie for 2 years before finding out she was cheating. The day I found out was a total blindsider. I was scrolling through her messages and stumbled on some dirty texts she'd been sending to her male BFF of 8 years. Susie always swore he was just a friend, and even though I'd get jealous sometimes, I trusted her. Our whole relationship was built on that trust. So, imagine my shock when I accidentally saw those texts. It felt like the ground beneath me just disappeared. I confronted her right away, and she broke down, apologizing like crazy, saying it was a one-time slip and that he'd never meant anything more than a friend. She promised to block him and assured me it wouldn't happen again. I was devastated, but wanted to believe her, so we started marriage counseling. Susie seemed genuinely sorry and put in real effort to win back my trust. For a while, things were looking up. She was super transparent and attentive, so I decided to stick around and give it another shot because I still loved her and believed people could change. But guess what? It was a huge mistake. After some time, I caught her trying to secretly meet up with her so-called friend again. She told me she was going out with a coworker, but something felt off. Trusting my gut, I called the coworker and they had no plans with Susie. My heart sank as I realized she was probably meeting up with that guy. That night was hell. She came home super late and completely drunk, ignoring me like I didn't exist. I felt invisible and heartbroken. When I checked her phone, there was a text from him saying, "That was so much fun. We should do this more often," with a tongue and sweat drop emoji. Talk about a gut punch. There was no way to misinterpret that. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of betrayal. The next morning, I confronted Susie, and she tried to flip the script, accusing me of invading her privacy by calling her coworker and claiming I was paranoid. But I wasn't backing down. I showed her the text and demanded an explanation. She brushed it off, saying that's how friends talk. Yeah, right. I told her I'd confront the guy directly if she didn't come clean, and that did the trick. She got nervous and finally admitted they'd made out after getting drunk. Her confession shattered any trust I had left. She tried to justify it by blaming our boring marriage, but I wasn't having it. I told her straight up that her cheating was the reason our marriage went downhill. That was the breaking point for me. I couldn't forgive or overlook what she'd done. Susie finally realized how serious it was, but by then, it was way too late. When the whole mess started, she was all about begging for forgiveness. She admitted her issues and was like, "Please don't leave me. I'll work on myself and on us." But honestly, I could see that the trust was just gone. No matter what promises she made, the damage was too deep. I realized that sticking around was just delaying the inevitable. Her betrayal was a crack we couldn't fix, and it wrecked our marriage to the core. After coming to terms with all this, I had to make the toughest call of my life. I asked her to move out. Thankfully, we had a prenuptial agreement, so I didn't have to worry about financial fallout during the divorce. Despite her begging and trying to get her friends to persuade me to forgive her, I stood my ground and eventually kicked her out. I know it sounds harsh, but I was in so much pain. I always thought we'd grow old together, but after what she did, I was shattered and knew I'd never be the same again. I talked to my parents and my older sister Nina about what had happened. They were stunned and super upset. No one saw Susie's actions coming. They assured me they'd support me through the divorce, which gave me some comfort. But Nina was unusually quiet the whole time, which was weird. When I asked her what she thought, especially since she was really close to Susie during our marriage, she gave me an unexpected response. Instead of acknowledging my feelings, she asked if I was sure about divorcing Susie, pointing out that Susie didn't have any family support. I was taken aback. It felt like she cared more about Susie than about my emotional pain. I firmly told Nina that Susie's well-being wasn't my concern anymore. I questioned why she seemed more worried about my ex than about me, her own brother. Nina defended herself, saying she was just worried about me making a rash decision. She always thought Susie and I were meant for each other and was still in shock about the divorce. She asked if I'd regret this later. Though I found her response odd, I didn't dwell too much on it. The whole situation was already draining, so I focused on getting through the divorce. At first, things seemed to go well during the proceedings. My lawyer was confident we'd win, but then Susie dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. I was blindsided and just couldn't believe it. Life seemed to have other plans, wanting to hurt me more. Susie and her lawyer urged me to halt the divorce, saying we should try to work things out for our child's sake. Susie insisted she wanted a traditional family upbringing for the kid. I pushed back instantly, saying there was no way the child could be mine. She argued back, saying she never slept with anyone else other than me. She kept urging me to consider what was best for the child and to fight for our marriage. But I wasn't buying it. It was clear she was trying to derail the divorce and guilt-trip me into staying. I stood firm, insisting the divorce would go on. I said we'd do a paternity test after she gave birth to see if the child was mine. But Susie's lawyer countered, saying that since we were still legally married and she claimed she hadn't been with anyone else, I was automatically the father. They said they'd seek child support from me. My lawyer disagreed, pointing out that without a paternity test, the claims were baseless. But we knew the legal system doesn't always protect men in these situations. In the weeks that followed, Susie's lawyer sued me for child support, presenting evidence to back their claim. They painted me as a controlling freak trying to escape responsibility. They even brought in witnesses to testify for Susie. To my shock, my older sister Nina was one of them. I thought she was there to support me, but she testified against me, saying she believed Susie couldn't have possibly cheated and that the child was mine. Hearing Nina support my ex-wife over me was heartbreaking. She knew how much I loved Susie and how deeply she hurt me. Yet, there she was, supporting Susie's lies. After court, I confronted Nina about her testimony. I was shocked and felt utterly betrayed, but she stood by her decision, saying she believed she was doing the right thing and that I'd appreciate her stance in the future. I was furious and let her know how disgusted I was. She countered, saying I shouldn't be cruel to an unborn child and consider the financial difficulties Susie would face without my support. So, there I was, caught up in this whole mess. My sister straight up told me that I'd never get where she was coming from because I didn't have those maternal instincts like women do. She basically said that the least I could do was cough up some cash for the kids' expenses. Man, I felt so used and seriously disturbed by her take on things. I mean, how could she care more about Susie's financial needs than the emotional wreck I was becoming? My parents were also super disappointed in her. They told Nina she had no right to go behind my back and testify against me. But the damage was done. My own sister testifying against me made the court think Susie was telling the truth and that I was dodging responsibility. So, the court sided with my ex, and I got slapped with child support until the kid turns 18. I was fuming and couldn't accept the ruling, but despite all our efforts, my lawyer and I were stuck. Fast forward to now, it's been a while since the divorce with Susie, and every month I'm still shelling out child support for a kid who doesn't look anything like me. A paternity test even showed he isn't mine. But because Susie was pregnant while we were married, the law says the kid's still my responsibility. So I'm stuck paying until he's 18. All of this has made me even angrier at my sister than at my ex. I totally blame Nina for landing me in this mess. That's why I've been giving her the silent treatment and ignoring her at family gatherings, even though my parents keep begging me to forgive and move on. The rest of the family seems to get it, though. Some cousins and other relatives have also distanced themselves from Nina. Nina's complained to our parents several times about how I've made her an outcast. She tries to defend her actions by saying she did what she thought was best for the kid, but no one's buying it. The family sees through her mistakes and stands by me. Last year, Nina married her boyfriend Joshua. I got an invite but didn't go. I later found out from my parents that many other relatives didn't show up either, which really bummed her out. After getting married, Nina and Joshua were trying for a baby. My parents were over the moon about the idea of a grandchild. Recently, I had to head to a nearby town for a work conference. After the conference wrapped up, my coworkers and I decided to chill out at the hotel bar. Imagine my shock when I saw Nina there, cozying up to some older guy. She didn't see me, so I kept it low-key and watched them. They seemed super flirty and comfortable with each other. I couldn't believe my eyes. My married sister acting like this? Without thinking too much, I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pics to get some proof. I caught clear shots of both their faces. As I watched, they eventually got up and headed to his room together. My mind was racing. Was I really seeing my sister about to cheat on her husband? I wanted to yell at her, but I knew from experience that cheaters don't learn unless they're caught. Once I got home, I decided to reach out directly to her husband, Joshua. He deserved to know the truth. I found him on Facebook, shot him a friend request, and waited. A few hours later, he accepted. So, I sent him a message introducing myself as Nina's brother and said we needed to talk. I asked him not to tell Nina about my message and gave him my number. He called me not long after, obviously curious. He already knew about me from Nina and my parents, but was surprised I'd reached out. I apologized for not being at their wedding and explained I regretted that we were talking under such circumstances. He asked what was up, and I told him what I'd seen at the hotel. I carefully avoided saying cheating right away since I didn't know if they had an open marriage. But as I told him the details, he started asking tons of questions about what Nina was wearing and who the other guy was. He was clearly upset. To back up my story, I told him I had photos of Nina with the guy and sent them over. Joshua was clearly crushed and trying to process it all. After a brief pause, he thanked me for being honest and asked why I'd go out of my way to help him, considering we weren't close and I wasn't talking to Nina anymore. His question hit me hard, and I ended up sharing my own story about dealing with my ex-wife's cheating and how Nina added to my pain by testifying against me in court. So basically, I ended up paying child support for a kid who wasn't even mine. Joshua was super quiet for a while after I told him my side of the story. Then he shared that Nina had spun a completely different tale. According to her, Susie and I were already on the rocks, and we had stopped being intimate, so Susie made a one-time mistake that led to our divorce. Hearing this total distortion of reality made my blood boil. I set the record straight with Joshua, telling him that Susie had actually cheated on me twice, shattering my trust repeatedly with her male friend. Thankfully, Joshua believed me and appreciated my honesty, which shed light on my sister's deceptive behavior. He told me he had no plans to stay with a cheating partner and would be having a serious talk with Nina. The days that followed were pretty intense. My parents kept calling to accuse me of ruining Nina's life because she was now facing a potential divorce. They blamed me for sticking my nose where it didn't belong and were super frustrated about not getting a grandchild from her. I didn't hold back in the argument either. I snapped back, saying it wasn't my fault that their daughter couldn't stay faithful. I pointed out that instead of obsessing over a grandchild, they should teach Nina better values and morals. Nina even sent me a nasty text, calling me a spiteful little boy and saying that Susie's infidelity was somehow justified and that I deserved everything that happened. Her message left me fuming for hours. But karma's a funny thing. I recently found out that Nina is pregnant. She's claiming Joshua is the father, but he's not buying it and refuses to take responsibility. Joshua reached out, asking me to testify for him in court since I had taken incriminating pictures of Nina with another guy. I agreed without hesitation, not just to seek some sort of revenge, but also because I felt for Joshua. I didn't want him to go through the same betrayal I experienced with my ex-wife. Since then, Nina and my parents have been on my case non-stop, begging me not to testify against her. They keep harping on about how families should come first. The irony isn't lost on me since Nina didn't seem to care about family when she testified against me during my divorce. I'm determined to teach her a lesson and make sure Joshua doesn't endure the pain I went through. Update 1. I'm surprised at how divided everyone is on this. There are even some women in my comments trying to convince me to support Nina, despite her cheating. Honestly, shame on them. I'd have had no problem with paying child support if my ex-wife had proven the kid was mine. But she knew it wasn't, since we weren't even intimate at the time. She forced me to be liable for the child because she couldn't afford it on her own. I couldn't prove she was with the other guy aside from one text I found. So yes, I do hate Nina for siding with my ex and screwing me over. But now that she's manipulating her husband, I won't stand for it. I'm going to testify against her, making sure Joshua doesn't suffer as I did. If it turns out the child is Joshua's after all, I'm sure he'll step up because he seems like a decent guy. But until it's proven, why should he pay child support for a kid that might not be his, especially since Nina hasn't shown any remorse? Unlike my situation, Joshua and Nina don't even have a prenuptial agreement, so he might have to pay alimony too. I believe I'm doing the right thing, and it's good to see most people supporting me. Update 2. It's been a while since I last updated. Today, I testified against Nina in court, laying out everything I saw her doing with the other man and presenting all the evidence. Nina's angry stare was on me the entire time, but I stood my ground. Despite her lawyer's attempts to dismiss my testimony, claiming I had a grudge, the judge upheld it. I hope my testimony will help Joshua and that he won't be forced to pay child support. But we'll see what happens. All this has strained my relationship with my parents. My mom called me, choked up, after learning I testified against Nina. She was so disappointed, saying they hoped I wouldn't do that to my sister. I was frustrated and reminded her how they never fought for me like this when Nina messed up my life during my divorce. They even forgave her, yet here she was, calling me a disappointment. I told her it was unfair to scold me for standing up for what's right, especially when they didn't support me in the past. It felt like a betrayal, and I made it clear I didn't need them in my life if they were going to prioritize my cheating sister over me. Since then, I've stopped talking to my parents and have been ignoring their calls and messages. Update 3. I'm back with more news on Nina's situation. I'm pleased to let you know that Joshua doesn't have to pay any child support to my sister. I'm pretty sure Nina is super upset about it. Honestly, though, I can't help but feel some satisfaction that at least one person avoided the unfair burden many of us, including me, have had to deal with. Also, for the last time, let me clear up a few things that people keep asking about in my posts. No, I don't have a relationship with Susie's son, even though I'm still paying child support for him. If he ever grows up and reaches out to me, I'll definitely tell him the truth about his mom. And yeah, my parents and I still aren't talking. Honestly, it feels like a weight off my shoulders not having them call me every other day to accuse me of not supporting my sister. Nina won't confront me, probably because she's still embarrassed after I testified against her. Oh, and yes, she will be getting alimony from Joshua, but we all knew that was coming. My parents don't have a relationship with Susie's son because they know he isn't my child. No idea if they'll accept Nina's kid, but who knows. That's all for now. Please like and subscribe for more stories.